screen, by the way, and I was able to hear you earlier as well. So if you need me, I'll be off camera, I'll be mute. Let me know.
Excellent. Hey, thank you so much, Rohan. Really appreciate the intro. Hey, everyone. Hopefully you're having a great evening or a great afternoon, depending on your time zone. As Rohan indicated, my name is Sanjay Dar. I've really spent my entire career in the enterprise within IT, over 25 years in IT. I actually started my career as a Unix administrator a long time ago. And I basically had roles across operations. I've done production support, I've done engineering, I've done architecture. I spent many years as an enterprise architect in the big four consulting organizations. You see some of the logos on the screen. I spent almost a decade at AWS. I was in a variety of customer-facing technical field roles, and I also basically led a data and AI team at Veolia. In fact, I'm right now in the process of building my own AI-based startup. So this is a topic that's very passionate for me. My perspective that I'll share with you is my personal experience, my experience leading and building data and AI teams, and also working with large global customers who've basically struggled with it over the last couple of years, given the hype around AI. And that's really what the agenda I have to share with you for today. So we'll start with, what is the challenge when it comes to managing AI teams? Now, when you look at a typical AI project, it's not like a classic software development project where, with most software applications, you generally have a set of requirements, you come up with user stories, and you may use an agile or Scrum process to work through and basically build a product. With AI projects, there's a certain degree of uncertainty that you start off right at the get-go. And you basically start off with questions that either have vague answers, and sometimes even the questions themselves are vague. There's also a huge dependency on data, which is why you see a lot of organizations spending time on getting their data right. Because if you have bad data, you're going to have bad AI. So there's a strong dependency on data and having the right quality of data so you can basically have an AI project that actually works. Thirdly, you do have cross-functional dependencies because you really can't build these AI systems in silos. It does involve various roles, many times working across different lines of business, different parts of the organization, which we'll go into more detail what that really looks like. So when you look at some of the key challenges, so this is something I personally experienced. I have worked with many customers as well when I was at AWS to work through some of these challenges. Is really a lot of these AI projects start off as almost like a science project where there's some new shiny technology and people want to add things onto their resume. They want to play with the new and cool stuff, which is great. But you basically have this open-ended POC which just never ends, and you're swapping different models, you're trying different things, and there's really no clear outcomes. So the way you address that is really upfront. You do want to define what success looks like. And even if you do have to do a proof of concept, you want to make sure you have a clear path, clear KPIs, and a clear path to production, and how you measure your success along the way, where you may have to pivot and iterate. The next really is on data availability and quality. I've seen a lot of projects fail because data was really not as good as what a lot of people thought it was. And when you actually get into the project, start working on it, that's when you come up with data inconsistencies, data errors, and just really not having the right data for you to be successful with your AI initiative. And really, the way you get around it is to make sure you take care of some of this data audit and data quality assessment right up front. So this way, if you find gaps in the data, you sort of have to manage that early in the project and not 3 months after you've started the project. Next is really around talent, and we'll spend more time doing the presentation on what some of these talent gaps are. But this is something you quickly realize this is a fast-changing field. I mean, in the whole world of AI, I think has dramatically changed. Even though AI has been around for 40, 50 years, or at least machine learning has, the field of AI has dramatically changed in the last 4 to 5 years. So you really want to mitigate this by having a clear requirements review and also identifying the existing people you have, understanding, assessing their skills. And if there's a gap, you may have to either fill that gap with training, or you might have to get some consulting or get some help externally to plug those gaps. Last but not the least is really around business process integration. And this is really where these projects technically finish, but there's really there's no clear finish line because no one wants to sign off on it, because a lot of times these people, if these are key stakeholders or decision makers, they don't even know what they're signing off on. So the way you really get ahead of that is you want to make sure you engage early, especially with key business stakeholders. You plan, you socialize this enough, you plan, you do training sessions, you have documentation, and you really think of deployment not just as an install, but as an organ. You handle this through OCM or org change management. Let's take a look at what some of the key roles and what the team structure would look like, when it comes to building an AI project. So when you look at traditional IT departments, I've seen a lot of the customers I work with. These were generally the large global companies, and really I've seen every customer sort of structure themselves very differently. So your mileage may vary a little bit based on where what organization you work in and what the structure looks like. I've seen the titles can be all over the place. So you'll see titles like machine learning engineer or ML engineer or ML ops engineer or data scientist or data engineer. A lot of times I've seen these titles used interchangeably. The lines are very fuzzy. So there's really no consistency I've seen across the org, but there's some general patterns which we'll talk about in terms of what are some of the key roles when it comes to AI projects, and how do you make sure you have the right skills and right capabilities within your organization. So first and foremost is I guess the classic data scientist. So when you really look at typically what a data scientist would do, these are folks, I used to actually think of them as the folks wearing the white lab coats. These are very sophisticated people, very hard to find. Mark Zuckerberg is willing to pay, $500,000 for finding some of these folks. They don't exactly have to be that caliber, but really these folks are the ones, not exactly building AGI, which would earn you $500,000 at Meta if that's what you're skilled at. But these are folks who are looking at working on algorithms, building data models. These are some of those math geniuses. Some of that math makes me dizzy when I see the math when it comes to machine learning. So they actually apply statistics, and they apply a lot of that domain knowledge they have from whatever line of business to really find those insights and build those models. So these folks also do a lot of feature engineering, where they will actually look at different features. They will actually do a lot of tuning, and then they'll sort of do this iteration, rinse and repeat when it comes to training, building, and deploying models. The data engineer really, I think, is a very key role. In fact, this role, given the emphasis on data, having good data for good AI, has made this a very critical role, because the data engineer really is responsible for building out the pipelines. They actually write the ETL that would get data from different sources, whether these are structured data, semi-structured data, or even unstructured data. They would pull this data, bring it into the data lake, run ETL on it, and basically set up the pipelines. And they make sure the data is clean and it's available for AI. You have then the classic architect and engineer roles within machine learning as well. And the way I see this is, when you look at different phases of a project, whether it's an IT project or even a data science project, you have, there's really three main cycles. You have design, you have build, and you have run. And typically the architects are involved early on, when it comes to requirements gathering and even part of the design. And then the build and run portion is where it moves into engineering, and then it moves into ML ops. I look at ML ops as the DevOps in the machine learning world. So these are folks, if you're an ML ops person, you would be handling things like drift in model, drift detection, being able to tune the model, and then being able to adjust the model and then redeploy it and potentially retrain it, and then put it back in production. And when you look at core ML engineering, I mean, these are the folks that act as the bridge between some of that high level architecture and then really bridging that data science and software engineering. So they actually take the models that have been built by the data scientists, and then they really optimize it and run it in production. Next, you have the analyst. So the analyst really is somebody, is not really a technical person. I mean, these are folks who are more business oriented. They may be working with some of the operational data. So they might know maybe a little bit of SQL, so they can potentially run some queries. But they really, come in with a more of a business expertise, and they actually will ask the right business questions off the data. And that's really, what the role the analyst plays, and they really help in providing that business perspective to being able to build an AI project successfully. Last but not the least, you have the domain experts. So these folks generally live inside of a line of business. So whatever, if your company is a financial services company, so it's going to be one of the lines of business, or if you're a manufacturing company or a pharma, these are line of business individuals. And again, they help really define the requirements. They also help validate if what the outputs from the AI is actually going to meet the business requirements or not. So when you look at the team structure, uh, generally speaking, what you see on this slide is typically what I see in the enterprise. Now, if you're part of a startup or if you're in a smaller organization, some of these lines are a little bit blurred. So it may not look as clean as you see on this slide. But really, most AI projects today in the enterprise, they sort of sit in a POC stage or maybe in a pilot stage rather than full production. Again, full disclaimer, if you're a startup, you're a small company, maybe you have things running in production. This slide really talks about generally what you see in large enterprises. So in fact, there's also a report from MIT. In fact, it's as recent as of last week. So MIT came out with a report saying 95% of the Gen AI pilots at companies are failing. And despite the rush to integrate all the powerful new models and all the cool stuff when it comes to Gen AI and now agentic AI, it's only about 5% of these pilot programs actually achieve rapid revenue acceleration. The vast majority just stall without delivering no measurable impact on the actual bottom line of the company. So I can share some links at the end of the presentation where you can actually read up, on this article from MIT. So there is a mental model in terms of a framework. Since AI teams are so multidisciplinary, it's important to have some sort of a framework. So you can use this, what you see on this Venn diagram, as almost like a guiding principle. So use this as a tool to assess what the org maturity is when it comes to AI and ML. So there's really three core areas, and we'll get into each of these areas in the next slide. So the first one really being around business and strategy. So this really, the roles that represent the business and strategy really provide that domain expertise or that business knowledge. So typically you'll find people like project managers, product managers, you'll find change management leads representing this business area. So they really help handle a lot of the planning, a lot of the communication, a lot of the coordination when it comes to running and executing on an AI project. Next, you have really the core engineering team. So these are the folks that will take these models and really make them usable. So they'll develop the software that sort of stitches. They might build a front end or whatever the interface is, or the APIs that interface with these models. So this is where they'd focus on writing production quality code and then basically getting these deployed. And then from a data science perspective, these are again folks who are analyzing the data. They're actually building and developing the models, and they're really focused on developing the right algorithms so these models can perform efficiently. So development is really where it starts, but ultimately production is the target destination, especially if you wanna see the bottom line, and if you wanna actually turn this effort into something that's going to produce value. it has to be productionalized and it has to really be monetized and be able to generate revenue. So when you look at the development environment, you generally have data scientists sort of take the lead here because they are sort of running things in development. They are working hand in hand with the domain experts to basically work through the requirements and finalize what that design looked like. The data engineer really is a key role here because they're actually providing that support. They're actually providing the right type of data that's going to be fed in, whether it's for training these models or for building these models. And really the emphasis in dev is for you to iterate quickly, get some quick value, and then basically work through some of the bugs in an iterative way so you can move quickly into production. And really, once you shift into production, this is really where the SD or the software engineers play a key role, and of course working alongside hand in hand with the data engineer and the domain experts to productionalize this and really bring this to value quickly. So I do see there's a bunch of questions. I will, there's 150 of you, and there's only one of me and Rohan. I will address these a little bit later during the presentation. So do keep your questions coming in. I will take a quick look once because I'll be tag teaming with Rohan in a few slides down the road here. So let's take a look at what are the different stages when it comes to organizational maturity if you're looking to sort of get an AI team built from the ground up. So what you see really here on this slide is like a crawl, walk, run across 3 phases. So if you're doing this early in your organization, there is basically there's really no formal team structure. So you're sort of doing this ad hoc. You're doing this in a decentralized way. You obviously need some exec sponsorship for you to do this. So you need some senior executive, whether it's from a line of business or if it's a CIO or a CTO or someone, a vice president of your business unit, where they would approve this. And then you're pulling in people from different departments and sort of making sure they have the right skills, and you're sort of cobbling together and being scrappy. I mean, this is like a typical startup. You're doing this early stage. When you move to that next phase, so this is where you're gonna slowly sort of bring in some structure, where you're gonna have a separate analytics team, and then working hand in hand with IT and even with the different business units. And then you may sort of formalize a role like a CDO. So this is a journey I went through in my last role, where I was putting together this data and AI team. We identified a CDO who was reporting into me, and then we sort of built the data engineering function underneath this person. And the pros here is you have some concentration of expertise, but really the other thing you got to figure out is you do need strong coordination. So you want to avoid having some of the silos. So you just have to be careful and maintain that balance. And when you go to stage 3, which is the run phase, so this is really where your analytics function is very deeply integrated into the business. You basically have a dedicated team that actually owns data engineering, that owns data science, and really the end-to-end. It's you build it, you run it. They actually own that end-to-end workflow, and this is sort of where you want to be. Now this does take some time and investment and effort. It does, and we look at some of the skills and some of the investments you'll have to make as a leader if you want to get to this stage. So let's take a look at what the Flash team model is, and also share some insights based on my own experience personally, building out some of these teams, and also working with customers who are actually building out their AI and ML teams. So here's what I've seen, working with a lot of large global customers. When it comes to learning, I mean, in general, anyone in IT needs to do continuous learning. But when you look at the AI landscape, the pace of change is at a completely different level. So this is really where, as a leader, you do want to encourage your team to stay current. Things are changing literally on a daily basis, and I'm not kidding. I think every day when I look at my LinkedIn, when I look at my different data feeds, I see there's something new happening. In fact, just recently, just before this call, there's a huge buzz now around automating Excel. That seems to be the new sort of trend, where they want to use AI and even agentic AI to Excel, basically to basically help in filling out Excel spreadsheets and Google Sheets. So this is where you want to make sure you encourage your team to stay up to date. The second challenge, which I've seen, is really around handoffs. Again, this is generally in the larger organizations, because you tend to be a little bit of you tend to be siloed, where you may have a prototype that, let's say, starts off. Let's say the data scientist starts writing this in R, because they know R, they're comfortable with it, and they want to move to production. And then the software engineer says, "Hey, we have to rewrite this in Python or in a different language." So you just want to be mindful of some of these challenges. I've actually seen this happen in my career, where you have to sort of deal with this, and then it adds additional complexity and delays to your project. Last but not the least, we've touched on this, is around data, and really, in terms of the data engineering team not being able to get the data they need a lot of times due to politics. I personally faced this when I was building out my team in my last role, where people tend to hold on to data, and they don't want to basically let go of the data. So you just have to, this is where you have to sort of work with leadership, work with your management, and really empower your data team so they can actually get the data they need to be successful. So I mentioned Flash Team earlier. So and you can pick your term. Flash Team is really a small, specialized, strike team. And the whole idea of putting this team together is so you could quickly deliver on a project. Now, I've seen different companies use different terminology. Some companies talk about a tiger team or a SWAT team, so you can pick whatever your favorite word is for this. But there are a few key roles that this Flash team needs in order to be effective. So let's look at what those roles are. So firstly, any team does need some team lead, so you have who can set the vision and sort of steer the direction for the team. Generally, with these Flash teams or with these SWAT teams, it tends to be a senior data scientist, and the reason is because the senior data scientists, they do understand things like they know how to build models, and they understand the math, and they're PhDs, and they're really smart people, but they also have the business context, which is extremely important for you to give the right direction and guidance to these to the project. So you usually have a data scientist who's the team lead, a senior person. Obviously, you have a data engineer. I think we've talked enough about the data engineer, playing a key role in this, because they're the ones going to be cleaning the data, running ETL, building those pipelines, and bringing data into the data lake for us to be able to use. You're going to have a domain expert or slash the advisor. So these are not full-time roles, but these are roles important to identify, where they basically provide that domain-specific context, which is crucial. Again, depends on your organization, whether you're a bank or a pharma or a manufacturing. You would do need representation from the line of business, so they can actually sort of explain the business process. You also need to be able to visualize this data. So you either need a visualization engineer. Some people also refer to them as BI engineers, business intelligence engineers. So these are the folks that create the pretty graphs. So think Tableau or Power BI or Looker or QuickSight. So these are the folks that actually work with these visualization tools. And lastly, you also need a generalist. You need like a data analyst to sort of help you stitch the gaps, especially if your domain advisor is going to be available part-time, and really more as a senior leader. That's when you're going to rely more on the junior data analyst to help you with maybe understanding the data, or even helping you operationalize and help you connect the dots with the business. So let's take a look at an example of a Flash team in action. So I want to take you back to 2020. I don't think many of us will forget what I think we went through with COVID-19. And really, this was a time when it was literally, pandemonium, and, we had a pandemic. And really, the government was really trying to understand what is actually going on in terms of the infection rate, and how are vaccines being administered. I mean, there was all this different data. I mean, there were people were dying, and people were getting sick, and hospitals are getting filled. So they really wanted to use data to drive some insights so they could actually stay ahead of the pandemic. And this is actually when they had a Flash team formed. So they basically had data scientists. They actually focused on a lot of the modeling, to forecast the case counts and the different strains and everything else that the virus was, and how it was spreading. The data engineers were actually pulling data. I mean, these were sources coming from clinics and hospitals, all over the country. So they were actually pulling a lot of this data in. You also had domain experts. So these were, not exactly Anthony Fauci, but people on, like public health officials, people in public health who were providing the advice. And then, of course, you had, BI engineers and visualization experts who were building some of the cool charts and graphs that you actually see on this slide. So this really small team, really worked very intense, and actually in a matter of a few weeks, they were actually able to, deliver some key outcomes and actually be able to, pull a lot of this data together and drive some insights. So let's talk about the labor market. So staying on top of labor trends is really going to be critical for managing AI teams. Um, this really includes knowing which roles are in demand and really where this talent is located, and how are some of these new trends impacting the skills that you need. So we'll look at some key roles. There are a handful of roles where there's a lot of demand, even in the current market conditions, where tech jobs have been severely impacted. So let's look at some of those roles. So you have the AI program manager, and even though this is dated, I mean it's from LinkedIn's like 2021 analysis. I still think this is still valid. I mean it's still a role that's it's in huge demand because you really need someone to manage a lot of these programs, especially given the high failure rate that we've seen with some of these programs. Of course, you have the AI and ML engineer. These are the folks who are going to build, deploy, and run these models. Data engineer, again, very critical role, like we've discussed earlier. You have the data scientists. Again, these folks are really highly sought after. If Zuckerberg is willing to pay 500 million, I mean these guys better be good. But again, in jokes apart, the folks that Zuckerberg wants to pay 500 million, there's only like 70 or 80 of those people on this planet. So there's not a lot of those people, which is why they have a very high demand, because they're going to be building AGI. But generally, data scientist is still a very sought after role. And then, of course, you have the domain experts. So this could be, these are, again, not technology people. These would be, lines of business folks. These come with the business knowledge. And then you also have product managers. So product managers are really going to be building that user experience. They're going to be building those stories. They're going to be really taking all these technical requirements and building the business requirements and then driving technology teams and driving the roadmap for the product. Okay, so with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it back to Rohan, and this will give me some time to maybe I'll take a peek at the questions. And Rohan, you can take it from here.
Sure. I think there are a lot of questions that come your way through the chat as well. If you want to pick few live, feel free to do that, Sanjay. By the way, just going through the data of the people who have registered with us so far. And just for context, even I didn't have a chance earlier, I would have shared it with you. We have like a good chunk of folks who have like 15 plus years of experience. If I were to put in numbers, almost 50% of the audience have registered with us for this webinar. They are 15 plus years experience, and more than 75 to 80% are folks who are 10 in the bracket of 10 plus years of experience. So folks, I think the context why I'm saying this is we have Sanjay with us. Any questions you have, feel free to drop in the Q&A. But because somebody who's like he's super senior, has been across he's seen his career spanned across different firms, and it has seen the earlier erstwhile tech structures and the current organization structures as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop in the Q&A. I think it'll be easier for him to answer and easier for you folks to see the answers to which he has replied to, the questions to which he has replied to. Sanjay, if you want to pick one or two questions, happy to do it right now as well. Any specific question that you see in the chat, or am I putting you on the spot and you can take it?
No, no, no. So I see a lot of comments, Rohan, in the chat. I'm actually looking at the Q&A panel. I think there's one about 95% failure rates. I'm going to drop a link for that. Let me see here. Some of these actually look like comments. I'm not seeing a lot of questions. There's one here, I think. I had learned AI is more about coding algorithms for decision making, and one trying to code to the level of thinking, doing complex. Okay, I'm not sure I understand that question. Let's
From
see.
Kalpana, again, Kalpana, we can take some questions live as well. I think this is more around somebody who has experience in building data pipelines for more than 10 years, and if they're eligible to apply for data scientist. In your opinion, somebody who has an experience of 10 years in data pipelines, building dashboards, again, with very limited context, based on your understanding, people with similar profiles, are they eligible to apply for data scientist roles?
So here's my approach, and this is something even when so I've been teaching at IK for over 3.5 years, and I've talked to hundreds of learners, and this has been one of the hottest questions I think in the last, I'd say, year and a half or so, is how do I transition into AI? So the first thing is I would not put limitations on yourself. So when you look at a role, I mean, if you don't apply to the role, you're not getting it anyway. So if you have 10 years of experience, and intentionally, what happens these days, what I'm seeing a lot of employers do, is they advertise these roles and they sort of throw everything in. I've also seen some roles where they ask for 5 years of Gen AI experience. Gen AI has not even been around for it's not even been 3 years since Gen AI has been around. So people sort of throw this. So the first thing I would say is don't exclude yourself. I think if you have the background, if you've worked, ideally, if you've had hands-on experience for the role you're applying for, yes. But if you're ambiguous, I would still apply for it, and at least get yourself a chance to land the interview. And then really, when you get to a point where you land the interview, that's when you can, of course, if you're part of the IKA program, you'll have the right guidance and coaching on how to actually prep and how to clear those interviews. And here's what I can tell you, first-hand experience. The FAANG interviews are tough. I spent 10 years at AWS. I did hundreds of interviews, and they're intentionally, hard to clear. So definitely, I think by you being here, you're putting yourself in a position where you're getting the right guidance and coaching. So I definitely would say first is don't discount yourself. Make sure you apply for it, and then use the right guidance and coaching to see how you can prep and clear those interviews. I was actually looking at a lot of the questions, and there is a theme. And the theme that I'm seeing is, hey, my role is X. I want to move to a role Y, and it's somewhere in the AI or ML or Gen AI space. Now, those are very, specific conversations, and these are one-on-one conversations I've had with many learners over the years. But in general, if you're looking to sort of make a switch in your career, you might be a backend engineer, you might be a developer, or maybe you're a product manager or a project manager. Uh, there's a few common themes. Now, again, your mileage may vary, so I can give you some general tips because I see a bunch of questions in that space. So number one is start learning some of the math foundations. I mentioned, with data scientists, there's a lot of math. I mean, a lot of these folks are PhDs with a white lab coat. So there's a lot of matrix operations. There's a lot of vectors. There's a lot of different algorithms, whether it's distributions. So, try to get up to speed on some of the algorithms. And this is something you'll have to discipline yourself, where you'd have to carve out 15 hours every week to basically teach yourself this. There's plenty of resources available. I mean, of course, if you sign up with the IK program, excellent. You have access through IK. You could also sort of do this on your own in a self-paced manner. There's resources you can leverage to teach yourself some of these basics. Next, you really want to learn some of the core ML concepts. So these would be, things like supervised learning, unsupervised learning. What is cross-validation? What is variance? So learn some of these core concepts within machine learning. And then you want to get into things like deep learning and neural networks and get into some of the more detailed aspects of machine learning. You definitely do want to spend some time doing some hands-on implementation. And if you don't have an account with Hugging Face, I would highly encourage you to sign up with Hugging Face, sign up with Kaggle. You have access to tremendous amount of data sets, a lot of examples for you to do, for you to build hands-on projects. And then eventually you want to move into Gen AI. And of course, now the buzz is around agentic AI. So I think, these questions are going to be very specific for you. use, whether it's this program, use AI to help you, so you can actually talk to Cloud or even ChatGPT and say, hey, here's my resume, here's the job that I want to apply for. Give me a training plan, or help me bridge the gap. So use some of the tools to, and of course, you can even speak one-on-one. I have these conversations with a lot of learners in terms of where they are now and where they want to get to, and what is that gap like. So that's basically where I'll leave it at. So with that said, let me switch back into the slides here. I know we have a few other things to cover before we close out for the evening. Okay, so let's switch gears. I know we were tag teaming between Rohan and I. So let's talk a little bit about what the talent market looks like, and what are the retention strategies when it comes to building out an AI organization. So when you really look at the hiring trends, this is a dynamic landscape. As I mentioned earlier, all the major tech companies, they're investing billions into talent. I mean, I've already told you about the Mark Zuckerberg punchline a dozen times, but there's a lot at stake here for some of these roles. So that's on the tier one companies. You have the FAANG companies, basically making all these investments. You also have the next tier, I'm going to say like the tier two sort of tech companies. There's a lot of new startups aggressively. They're actually competing for the same talent. And even within industry. So let's say you have no interest in joining a FANG sort of company, and you would rather be in finance or pharmaceutical or banking, or which is fine. I mean, all of these industries, all these lines of business, every industry right now is looking at AI and Gen AI and agentic AI. So there are opportunities even inside these different lines of business. So definitely explore those as well. And now with I think this is sort of a hit or miss. The remote work is, some companies are huge on it, and I do see a lot of the new age startups. They're huge on remote work. Some of the big tech, they're sort of coming back full circle. But really, the bottom line here is there is intense competition for these folks, for folks with this knowledge, and you really want to basically put yourself in a position where you become valuable in the market, even despite how things are currently in the current market situation. So here's a 5-year timeline. So if you sort of look back, the last 5 years, what has sort of transpired in terms of the hiring bubble. You basically had this boom phase, right? You had this sort of bubble that was blowing up during the pandemic. So there was, all the big tech companies, and even some of the non-tech companies were massively hiring people. And then come 2022, 2023, there was a little bit of correction, because with any hype cycle, there is, you have this sort of hockey stick that goes up, and then you sort of have a correction that happens. That's really what happened in 2022, 2023. I can tell you, every customer I talked to, I was at AWS during this time when this correction happened. Every customer I talked to was looking at saving costs. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had around cost optimization. How can we save money off our AWS bill? That was the number one thing I would talk to CIOs and VPs. They'd want to save money. So you really saw all these hiring freezes, during this period of time. Now I think, in terms of AI, I think it is fairly stable. It is shifting from hype to more practical applications, because I think companies are realizing they can very quickly spend a lot of money, and you can sort of look back and get caught in the hype and not have much value. So this is where a lot of CIOs, CEOs are like, hey, we got to be smart about how we do this. So it's in that stabilization phase right now. I think everyone knows the value of Gen AI and now agentic AI. So what they're really looking at is, how do we take some realistic use cases, and how do we actually build and develop these projects, so we can get some sort of return on our investment. So when it comes to managing your talent pipeline, and I can tell you, in my career, I've had both IC roles, individual contributor roles, and team leader. So I've led various teams as well. And there's really 4 aspects to really managing the pipeline. So first is your recruiting pipeline. So you really want to make sure. I know there was a time, when I was at Amazon, there was literally 10,000 open job positions. This was actually during the pandemic, 2020, 2021, even a little part of 2022. And my recruiting coordinators were my best friends because they were helping me source, because we all had goals to hire a certain number of people. And I was doing interviews every week. Every week I was interviewing people, to actually build that pipeline and recruit people onto my team, onto one of the teams at AWS. So that is just the first part. You hire people. The next phase is really doing the right onboarding and really putting them in different roles where they can be successful, where they can be productive, they can feel valued, and it's really assessing, being able to look at people's strengths and weaknesses and putting them in the right roles where they can actually be successful in their roles. And last but not the least is, yes, you've taken all this effort to hire, to train, and to sort of build these folks up. You want to make sure you do retain them. You don't lose them either to the competition, or generally what I found is the number one reason why people leave is generally they either don't find their work meaningful or they just don't like their manager. So that's really the top two reasons why people leave. So you want to make sure you have the right plan in place to retain these folks. So when it comes to really building out the org, you want to make sure you establish role families where, whether these are architects or whether these are engineers or whether these are developers, you want to basically have role families. You want to have very well-defined titles, including, the career path, whether it's engineer, senior engineer, principal engineer. You really want to have a very clear career path. And you also want to define the key responsibilities, the role, and what are some of the skill sets. So this way you avoid any confusion, you make it very transparent. And if I can tell you one thing, I think Amazon does a fantastic job. I think all the FAANG companies do a fantastic job with the way they write their job descriptions, and internally there is no ambiguity. It's extremely clear. If you're a principal and you want to become if you want to become a senior principal or a distinguished engineer, it's a very clear set of guidelines. So there's really no ambiguity. So you exactly know what your career path is. You know what you have to do to get to the next level, and whatever the gap is, your manager will help you get that coaching so you can sort of fill those gaps and make that jump to that next level. So, really, when it comes to, in addition to defining the roles, it's also having ready templates, especially, for different AI projects. You need to know what the makeup of the team will be. And this doesn't have to be people, this would be roles and skills that you need. So, for example, you have an example here on the slide. So if you want to do a data warehouse migration, you're going to need one project manager, you need a data architect, you might need a couple of data engineers and someone to do some, QA work. Versus if you're doing an analytics POC, you're going to need a data scientist, a data engineer, maybe you need a part-time domain expert, and then you need someone to do the visualization or business intelligence. So you really want to make sure, based on the types of projects that you anticipate executing, and these are the different categories of projects, you have a clear picture of what that makeup of that team is. So you're not trying to figure that out when you get the project. So these are predefined templates. They're ready to go. When you get that exec approval, the project is kicked off. You pull the right folks in, and then you have a kickoff, and you can start making progress right away. So when it comes to being able to do skill development and training, I touched on this earlier. You do want to assess any gaps in skills. Again, with this whole AI and ML landscape, I mean, this is changing at a rapid clip. There is, something new coming in every day. There's some new model, there's some new tuning, there's something new coming in. So it's really being able to, stay on top of, whether it's cloud or the different platforms, and make sure you have people, rate themselves and take quizzes so they can basically get instant feedback on where the gaps are and what they need to do to basically, close those skill gaps. You do want to have customized learning paths. So this will be, it will really depend on various folks. And this goes back to some of the questions I was seeing in the Q&A panel where, hey, my background is X, and I want to move to a role that is maybe going to want me to do Y. So this is where you're going to need a customized learning path. So even for folks who are already, if in your organization you're looking to move into an AI ML sort of role, you want to make sure as a leader, you're providing that right guidance to your folks, so they can sort of build that. So they have a clear training plan, a learning plan in terms of what they need to do to be able to make that switch. You also want to create a culture where team members share what they have learned, and there's many different forums to do this. You have a concept of a tech talk, where you basically, have you pick different topics, and then you have folks come in and talk about something that they've done, maybe a problem that they've solved where they've used innovation or a new way of thinking. You can also do lightning talks. These are like short talks, maybe for 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, where someone comes in and maybe they talk about a problem they've solved. Do show and tell sessions where someone comes in and shows what they've built or does a live demo. You also want to build interest groups and communities around AI and ML. So whether that's using Slack channels or email distributions, so this way you can have that sense of community and engagement, so you can sort of cross share and learn from each other. So when it comes to retention, really a lot of times when people leave, it's just not money. In fact, I forget whether it was Harvard or where this research came from. Why, in terms of why people leave, money is like the number 4 or 5. Usually they're just not fulfilled in their work. They just don't feel appreciated, or they just don't get along with their manager, or their manager is just a jerk. So they decide to leave. And that's really where some of the scenarios where and this is something which I've seen in my career as well. You have someone who's extremely talented, so you basically go through all this trouble, you hire someone really smart, and then this person can be doing so much more, and then you have them filling out spreadsheets and doing some reports, and I mean, right there, you're gonna lose them. The other side of the story is you hire someone extremely junior and you put them on some of these high profile projects, high visibility, where they are feeling so much pressure and there's so much tension that they just won't be able to handle it. They just get burnt out. So you want to make sure, as a leader, you are able to assess, and you're able to assess your team's capabilities, their skills, what they're good at, their strengths, their weaknesses. You want to make sure you stretch your people, don't break them, but you do want to stretch them so they feel that they're working on something challenging, they're learning something new. And you really want to make sure you match the right people to the right projects, so you sort of avoid this misalignment problem. And I talked about stretch and support. In terms of recognition and fair compensation, yeah, this is an area which it really depends on your company. I know, yeah, with the FAANG companies, that is not an issue. Rohan went over some of the comp. That's really, comp is never an issue. But if maybe you're a non-FAANG company, sometimes you have budget limitations. I had to deal with this in my last organization, where I would really like to do more for people, but you're sort of restricted by what the budget is, and then you just have to figure out what is fair, and then you really help. You really want to make sure you recognize people who are performing, and basically you help and reward them, and give them the recognition they need, and also balance it out with the compensation as well. So let's talk a little bit about project delivery, and what are some of the best practices when it comes to being able to successfully deliver an AI or ML project. Number one is executive sponsorship. I have seen, and this is something I can tell you firsthand, I have worked with many different customers during my time at AWS, where I will talk to, let's say, a chief architect or maybe a PM, and someone is very excited to do something, and I've almost every time see it fail, where they'll spend whatever few months doing something, and then some exec hears about it and they shut it down. So the first thing you really want to make sure is you find a champion. Usually, it would be good to have a champion from the business, whatever the line of business is. Find a champion, whether it's a CIO or a VP. Make sure you get them on board early on, and then make sure you get their sponsorship so this way, whether you need budget, you need resources, or if someone suddenly asks a question, why is my person spending 20% of their time here, you're sort of able to address a lot of that. You want to make sure you have a very clear value framework, and this is where instead of talking about what technology we should use or what model we should use or what data do we have, you really want to look at, hey, what business problem are we solving here and what business value is it going to create? So this really, using this sort of framework, it actually breaks it into 4 key categories, which we'll actually see here on this slide. So really, the value realization is around specific value you're going to aim to achieve through the project. So it could be something like, hey, we're going to increase revenue by 50%, or we're going to cut down processing time by whatever 30%. We're going to lower customer churn by 5%. So this is where you tie it into some sort of a business outcome. Next, once you've identified the business outcome, you basically look at what is the data that's needed for us to sort of achieve those outcomes. So this is where you get into things like identifying the data sources and looking at data governance and working through the architecture. And then once you have that, you sort of move into this phase where you get into model development, you get into picking the right algorithm, and then you look at you start putting together the next layer of that engineering once you've had the architecture finalized. And the last step really would be moving into a deployment phase where this is going to move into production. If it needs integration with other systems, you sort of build through and work through that integration. And then you set up the operational processes, whether it's monitoring or support around going live. So one of the things I've seen, and this is an area where I've actually had to sometimes stop customers. When I would talk to them, not every problem needs AI. Some problems can just be solved using traditional, either just software development or just heuristic programming. You don't need AI. If you need to convert, let's say, temperature in Celsius to Fahrenheit, you don't need AI for that. You just write a function or an if then else sort of. You use if then else programming for for doing simple tasks. So it's really some of the key questions to really ask before you embark on an AI project is there's actually 4 key questions. Is this going to increase revenue? Is this going to help the company or the organization reduce costs in a significant way? Is it going to improve the customer experience? And the customer experience generally, it's ideal if it's an external customer, not an internal customer, because external customers are generally revenue-paying customers, unless your internal customers, are actually paying for your services. And then lastly, if it's actually going to manage a key risk, or if it's going to help lower a risk or satisfy some sort of compliance, then that's sort of, that gives you an indication should you move forward with this or not. So when it comes to being able to get some success, you do want to start small and get some small, quick wins. So you get some, you get some interim results, and then that'll give you some confidence where you can now scale it. And when you have a little bit of success, success breeds success. So you can talk about it to your peers, to your leadership, and your leaders can sort of use it to give you a lot more sponsorship, and you can actually use that to get more traction to do bigger things with your initiatives. So you really want to think about how you can do this in phases. You don't want to boil the ocean. You want to take some small steps, especially since AI is very iterative. It's not like traditional. It's not like a traditional project where you sort of will start off and build everything in one go. You're going to have to sort of pivot and change directions multiple times as you sort of learn new things going through the project. So in terms of scaling and sort of moving into this hybrid model, when you look at large organizations, they generally have a lot of siloed teams. So you have a lot of different teams working on different parts of an AI initiative. And I've actually seen sort of 2 schools of thought to approach sort of the team construction. So the first approach is using a feature team. So this is where you could basically build a team. It's almost like a small self-contained team, which is organized by features. So, let's say if you're going to be delivering some specific feature as part of your AI solution, you would basically have a team which has different personas. So you would have a data scientist, you would have an ML engineer, you might have a data engineer, you might have, maybe an analyst. And these are cross-functional teams, but they're all working on solving a specific problem. So they have a common goal, and they're sort of working towards that. The other approach that I've seen is more like the silo teams or the component teams, where you basically have teams that are organized. So you'll have data engineers, you'll have data scientists, you'll have, of course, folks from the lines of business, and they sort of come together and sort of work more in a component-like fashion. So the component teams give you deep expertise, but then again you have the risk of having silos. The feature teams actually have a lot of cross learning. There's a lot of cross sharing and collaboration, but then there's some risk of having some duplication. When it comes to leadership balance, here's what I've really seen in terms of different AI projects. You definitely want to have both a technical leader and a domain leader. And really deciding who has the final say depends on the project context, and sometimes it has to do with organizational politics as well. So really, if you have if you have someone who's very skeptical, and maybe if it's someone from the business and maybe they don't understand the technology, that's when you really would lean on that technical lead taking some of those technical decisions and then working with their business counterparts to highlight some of the business value. So it's really a balancing act. So it really depends as a leader how you'd approach and solve this problem when it comes to having that balance between the line of business and you as a technical leader. In terms of some of the operational best practices, when it comes to AI projects, number one is really automation. This is something I know I even pushed my teams with. I noticed a tendency to do a lot of things manually. So you really want to automate, especially when it comes to data pipelines. And if you're building anything at scale, chances are you're going to be pulling in data, depending on the size and scale of your organization. You might be pulling in data from hundreds of sources. So, which we have data coming into a data lake. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen pipelines break because, somebody downstream, they change the schema and now the pipeline is broken. So you really want to try to build automation where, because this is an area where the most amount of time goes is with wrangling this data. In fact, there's about almost 70 to 80% of the time goes really into getting the data, cleansing the data, sort of transforming the data and making it ready for AI to use. So the more automation you can do with your pipelines, it'll really shave you a lot of time off your project. Next is really around data versioning. So version control, or if you're using Git, it's not just for software, it's not just for your code, it's for your data as well. So you want to make sure you're able to track version changes in your data, and even in the features as you sort of do your feature engineering with your ML projects. And this way, if you need to go back to a model that you deployed a couple of months ago, you exactly know what data it was, it was processing, and sort of what the model config was. So this way you have a good understanding of why if things either become unpredictable in terms of the model outputs, or if someone from security, or there's a compliance issue where they need to go back and check, you're actually able to provide that evidence, and you're actually able to go back and pull up that data and that model. But if you don't have it versioned, it's again going to be very manual, and this can literally be a nightmare, for you to, and can be a drain on your time to go back and try to prove some of the actions you may have taken. You do want to build a library of reusable components. So this is again back to whether it's your pipeline components or whether it's other aspects of your ML engineering project. So this way, whether it's maybe connecting to a data source, if it's authentication, you want to try to have reusable components that you can sort of plug in and really anyone can use to build and run those pipelines. So some things to take away from here. There is no, even when you have these highly skilled AI experts, whether these are data scientists or AI engineers, there's really no one person. AI is a team sport, and you really, the successful projects I've seen are really delivered using cross-functional teams, working closely with IT, with the business, with data teams. That's really what makes a project successful. Data is the foundation. So a lot of the heavy lifting in AI is all about the data. So make sure you want to make sure you spend the time to actually get your data in order before you really do anything large with your AI or ML projects, and focus on business value. So this is where I think I've seen a lot of organizations stumble, where they're caught up in the hype, or they're caught up with the shiny new object, or some people are just looking at learning the next new thing and playing with the next new thing. So you really want to focus on business value. And really, in the end, it comes down to people. So engage your end users. Even though I think all of us here are engineers, we're technologists, we like working with technology. In the end, it is about the end user experience. So if we haven't found a way to make that end user experience better, or improve that customer experience, then I think we're missing the boat here. So you definitely want to make sure you engage with your end users and communicate the benefits of what you're building. With that, we're gonna move into some interview questions. So I know we've covered a lot in, I guess, the almost last hour, 20 minutes or so. So let's look at, from an interview standpoint, especially if you're looking at an AI leader role, what are some of the questions you could potentially get? So one question would be, hey, how do you structure your AI team from scratch? So this is something we did spend time talking about. So we talked about some of the key roles. We talked about, what is that SWAT team? What does that Flash team look like? So it's really, key roles would be having a data scientist, having a data engineer, having, an AI ML architect, having the ML engineer, having the domain expert, having the analyst. So these would be some of the core roles that you would have for basically building an AI team from scratch. Next is really around your management style. So, question, and you'll see these in the FAANG interviews. A lot of the questions you will get, these will be open-ended questions. And what that means is you just cannot answer it with a yes or no. You have to sort of tell a story. And, so one of the questions you could potentially get is, describe your management style when leading highly skilled technical teams. So this really, the way you would answer this, goes back to some of the concepts we talked about earlier when it comes to retaining talent, evaluating talent, hiring people. How do you build and develop their skill set? How do you assess the strengths and weaknesses of your people? How do you give them meaningful work? Stretch people, don't break them. And building up that customized training and enablement plan for your people in your organization, so they can be successful with what they're building. The next question is build versus buy. So, how do you make that decision? Should you build or buy if you're building something for an AI project? So this is really a strategic choice, and you really need to balance a bunch of things. You need to balance speed. You need to balance cost. You need to balance risk. What are the long-term business goals? And really, you want to start with the business outcome. So before you really start solutioning anything, or talking about technologies, you really want to start with the business outcome. Is what is the business problem you're actually trying to solve? I mean, and why does this really matter? And things like, what is the revenue from this opportunity? Or are there compliance matters that need to be addressed? Is there, what is the customer experience like? Whatever we're building, is it something belongs in our core business? Does it give us, our organization, a competitive edge, or is it just a commodity? So this is where you would sort of, make that decision, and you would sort of assess, what you need to build or buy. And if you're gonna, if this is something that's going to give you a business, give your business a differentiating ability, then you would lean towards build. But if it's just something like a commodity, if it doesn't give you anything that's differentiating, for example, if you need to process payments, or if you need a CRM solution, you would just buy it. Just use whatever, you use a third-party processor for payments, because you don't want to deal with PCI compliance, because that might not be the specialty in your business. So that's really how you make that decision in terms of build versus buy.